Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
My guest is David Morgan. He's a live sound engineer. He's toured for many, many years with the likes of James Taylor, Paul Simon, Stevie Nicks, Steely Dan, Whitney Houston, Doobie Brothers, Fleetwood Mac. The list goes on forever. Bette Midler. He's the winner of multiple Tech Awards, Parnelli Awards, and all sorts of awards. He's also an outspoken columnist and just outspoken in general, I would say, which is a good and fun thing. So let's start out with just some basics about you, because obviously, I mean, clearly you started out as a musician because you really feel the music and everything like that. What's your own musical background?
I started playing piano when I was 6. My parents forced me to do it. We had a baby grand in the living room, and I believe it was Wednesday, Dr. Korb would come and hammer me into a piano. I liked it. I really did like it. But the formative moment for me at that age, in the following year when I was 7, was seeing Elvis Presley on Ed Sullivan. I mean, that more than anything, that determined the direction of my career.
That'll change things.
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to be Elvis Presley. Didn't you know? It was 1956. Yeah. And so after the piano, I had a brief foray into the trumpet and put it down immediately because I couldn't stand what was happening inside my head when you had to, blow into the thing.
Yep.
And it's incredibly loud, right? And so I was thinking about a tenor sax, but once again, it was also incredibly loud. And so I went with an alto. And I played an alto for about 4 years, and I played in all the grade school bands and in my junior high school band. But somewhere along the line, I picked up, well, I know why. My brother was a guitar player, and he had a band in high school, and I wanted to be like him. And he had a 1959 Gretsch Anniversary. Ooh. It was the most beautiful guitar. Mm. That was the first guitar I ever held, was my older brother John's beautiful Gretsch. And I was sold. I asked if I could get a guitar, and I got turned down flat. So I had to make some money, which I did by shoveling snow and cutting lawns and stuff. And I got a K F-hole acoustic with a DeArmond pickup on it.
Nice.
And I think I paid $15 for that.
It's a small fortune back in those days.
Yeah, I think it was $15. Oh, it was heavily used. Mm-hmm. The action was about this high. I still have permanent indentations in my fingers from playing that horrible thing. But that was my first guitar, and that kind of coincided with the folk revival, right? Mm-hmm. of the late 50s and early 60s.
Sure.
And so I started playing like Kingston Trio songs, and
Peter, Paul, and Mary,
and Ian and Sylvia, right. And Richard and Mimi Farina, and all the. But more than anything, I was in love with Tom Rush, as I actually became a guitar player. Tom was a
favorite of mine as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Tom was a Harvard dropout who played at the Club 47 in Harvard Square, and we used to take the trolley in from the town that I grew up in outside of Boston, and we'd go into the Club 47 when we were in high school. And so he was my real guitar idol when I left the saxophone behind and switched over to the guitar, and then once again had to use my own money to go buy a Martin 0018. Ooh. And that was in 64, and maybe 63. Could have been, yeah, probably 63. because that was the last time I ever played the saxophone. And I remember, well, I took the saxophone and I used my buffet saxophone as a trade-in on the 0018.
Sure.
And I still had to come up with another 75 or $100 or something. So that was that. The next thing I knew, I was getting paid $25 to play with another guy at a junior high school dance, and that was the start of my professional career.
And it's all over. So
Yeah.
take me from that to I think if I remember right, I did a little bit of homework here. You started out as a studio engineer.
I did, and you said that you worked at Cherokee, and of course we'd see tapes from Cherokee all the time. I worked at Alan Zentz.
I worked at Cherokee and at Paramount, so yeah.
Oh, cool. I worked briefly at ABC, and then got swapped over I got traded, as it were, over to Alan Zentz. Alan was a mastering engineer.
Sure.
Who did all the Donna Summer stuff, and
legendary guy, yeah.
And exactly, and Chris Bellman worked there as well, and what's Brian's last name? Brian Big Bottom, who worked for Bob Ludwig up in Portland. I'll try to think of it, but two huge legendary mastering engineers also came out of Alan Zentz. But I was a bad studio engineer. I don't have the greatest attention span, which for a front of house guy is a good attribute. You know, I want to be disturbed by squirrel. You know, if something's out of place in the mix, I want to go home. You know,
sure.
So because of I can shift focus really quickly. In the tedium of being a staff engineer at a major studio, doing word by word punches on a vocal for a singer of questionable quality was not something I wanted to be doing. And
come on, that never happens.
One day I guess I kind of couldn't stand it anymore, and I said some things probably that I shouldn't have said to the musician who couldn't play his part, and to the singer who couldn't sing his part. And I walked out the front door of the studio and never walked back in because I was fired, absolutely fired. So I found out that way that I was not the personality to work in the studio.
So how did you transition to live from that?
I was moonlighting while I was working at Alan Zentz, because if you work staff at the what did you make? I made $400 a week.
Money somehow, yeah.
Yeah, I was getting paid $400 a week. They wanted me to work 80 hours.
That's a small fortune, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was that was in order to make a little more money, I was working out at a club in North Hollywood called the Palomino.
Oh, I remember the Palomino, sure.
Country and Western Mecca. Yeah, at the time when I was there in the mid 70s, it was the only real big country and Western venue in Southern California.
It's the only thing outside of Bakersfield, I think, really. Yeah.
And I worked 3 or 4 nights a week, mixing front of house and monitors from front of house at the Palomino. And it was a wonderful experience. It was one of those trial by fire kind of things. And I had been mixing for some friends of mine while I was still a guitar player, because I didn't switch to being a full-time audio guy until I went to work for A1 Audio in 1978. Right, I was still playing guitar all the way through, and still playing in bands, and still hoping I'd get that one big shot, And so to make an extra $50 a night at the Pal, and I got to mix George Jones. I got to mix Vern Gosdin. I got to mix all these wonderful, wonderful personalities in the 70s. The Kendalls, the Merle Haggard came through. It was
also explains
legendary.
it also explains why you felt secure to just quit and walk out the door of the studio too, because you had another gig that was actually paying money.
Yeah, a little bit of money,
Yeah, yeah.
I was making 150 or 200 a week extra working at the Pal. It was only $50 a night. And
Mhm.
some nights, in addition to doing monitors from front of house and mixing the show, I had to do the spotlight with this hand, and
Yikes.
it
Mhm.
was what it was. It was straight out of a movie. But it got me the job at A1, right?
Mhm.
Because the guy I worked for at the Palomino got me hooked up at A1. So he said, "You're a really good mixer. Why don't you come to work here?" So,
Now A1 was doing all the Vegas shows at that point, right?
oh, they certainly were, and
Uh-huh.
that's how I got my whole uh, immersion in live audio. I mean, before I never had to worry about power distribution or bringing my own PA and things like that, because I'd always worked on club gigs or local. You know,
Mhm.
I did El Chicano outdoors. My first live mixing gig in California was doing El Chicano outdoors for about 5,000 people at USC on Altec mixers with big knobs,
Right, of
you know,
course.
and mixing through A7s, and that got me hooked. I said, this is really fun,
I can
and
imagine. Yeah.
so I stayed with El Chicano for a while, which was a wonderful, wonderful band,
Mhm.
and I credit them with teaching me how to mix drums and percussion together, and because we had a wonderful drummer, a wonderful bass player, and an excellent percussionist, Andre Baeza, and John DeLuna drumming, and Joe Pereira playing bass. It was just a wonderful, wonderful group of musicians.
Mhm.
And they at one time they had a huge #1 hit, and they were a very, very good band. And they had a song called "Tell Her She's Lovely" that was #1, I believe, in 1974.
Okay.
And so it was through them I got the reputation of this guy can mix Latin music, and so I worked for a band called East Side Connection that was a big disco band, had a bunch of disco hits at the time in the late '70s, and so and another band called ATM, which is short for All Those Mexicans. But the Neil Young's bass player, Rick, the bass player, was the bass player in that band. That was a great, great band. Jimmy Sevilla was playing key. Just a wonderful band.
Uh-huh.
And so I got to mix these three bands. But like I said, it's a weekend warrior stuff. It was in bars and or sometimes outdoors at Magic Mountain or something like that.
Well, I
So
bet
it
moving to
was.
Vegas was probably quite the culture shock then, huh?
Well, yeah, it was the first time I'd ever had to bring my own stuff to a gig that didn't come in the van that I was driving for the band that I was playing in
Oh.
back when I was playing in clubs.
Mhm.
So it was literally I just dropped me into the cauldron and sink or swim, and so I had to learn a whole lot of audio quickly because I was a musician who just happened to be able to put things into a relationship through speakers that people liked,
Mhm.
but I had no idea rhyme or reason of what I was doing with this stuff, and I had a little demo studio. We had a little 8-track demo studio with El Chicano, but that's a whole different ballgame with going into a Vegas showroom and putting in a big Paul Anka show or a Sinatra show or but that's where I got my first client at A1 was Suzanne Summers from Three's Company.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was the first person who actually hired me as a front of house guy, and then I got hired by Bruce Cohn, the Doobie Brothers manager,
Uh-huh.
to mix a guy named Roger Voudouris, who had a very big song in 1978 called "Get Used to It." And Roger was very, very talented and had a terrific band. And I got tapped to mix that band. First, I started out on monitors, and then they moved me out to front of house, and everybody was really happy with what was going on in front of house. And so that brought me to the attention of Bruce Cohen. So that explains how I ended up mixing the Doobie Brothers. But it was me stumbling my way through what was the building blocks of the career that I now enjoy,
Well, and there's a certain autodidactic nature to the art of mixing anyway, but it sounds to me like yours took a particularly sort of convoluted path because it not only in different types of surroundings and venues, but also in different types of musical genres. You really had to kind of trial by fire. I mean, going from El Chicano to Vegas shows to the Doobie Brothers. I mean, that's almost whiplash right there, just musically speaking.
Apparently, the one thing that was consistent in all those things was what was coming out of the speakers was making people happy, and so it was important for me to build confidence that way, and to be sent out by A1 on the Doobie Brothers on the PA crew was an incredible privilege. To end up mixing the band and to have Pat Simmons as my boss was just a gift, absolute gift. If that band had stayed together after the '82 tour, which just broke my heart when we played the last show up at Berkeley, it was I'd still be working for them if they'd stayed together in back then.
Yeah, there's a certain chemistry between those guys that really is inimitable.
I stuck with Mike. I did Mike's. I worked for Mike in '83 and '85, and it was great. It wasn't the same energy as the big band, though. The big band was just the minute by minute tour was. Oh my God, they were so good. They were just so good, and I mean. As I said, Pat Simmons was the kind of boss you anybody would want to work for, and I remember I was working with a band on Reprise when Toulouse Street came out, and everybody in the Warner Brothers camp went,
Yep.
What is that, and how can this sound this good?
Yeah,
right. And who is Teddy Temple? Right.
That's right. That was one of his first breakthroughs too.
Yeah. And oh my God, what a great sounding record. As soon as I heard listen to the music, first of all, I said, what variation of an E chord is that? And I broke out a guitar and started playing along with him, and the number of times I heard that song to close the show, it was so wonderful. I loved every night with that band. That was sheer joy.
Let me fast forward you a little bit. You became, I guess, I don't know if it was official or not, but you were a partner in Schubert Systems for a while. You and Dirk hooked up on that, and I know that you kind of took a break off the road for a while. Was that intentional or
no? Just. As the previous 3 years had gone since I left the guitar behind, I mean, things just were happening so fast. I mean, it was like leaps and bounds every month or so. This all of a sudden went up another stair, and it was. I mean, it seemed a little unnatural, all these things are being dumped into my path, here, have this opportunity right here. And so, I mean, once again, you just have to be incredibly grateful for every opportunity that comes along, but you have to have the balls to say, yeah, I can do that. And early in my career, I had no business saying that I could do what I could do. And
most of us don't early in our careers.
Well, I mean, I freely admit it. I got force-fed audio and acoustics and electronics by all these wonderful mentors that I had. Starting with Albert Siniscal, who was a brilliant man, and Mark Gander out at JBL. Who took me under his wing, and we became
brilliant
friends.
But crazy individual. Yes, absolutely.
Love that man.
Love the
man.
And
so happy he's still with us. I just love that man. And he was so good to me, and his partner Ken Lopez, who was national sales manager. I mean, they enabled me and Dirk to do what we did.
Mm-hmm.
But after I finished Barry Manilow in 1980, which really made me learn how to mix arenas and big shed shows really quickly on a rig that didn't belong to the Doobie Brothers, right? And so in the early spring of 1981, I got a call from Jim Gamble. Now, I had never met Jim Gamble, and he said, "You don't know me, but I have friends down in the South Bay who need someone like you." And I said, you know, I knew who Jim Gamble was because during 1980, the Doobie Brothers changed accounts from A1 to what was called Innovative Audio, which is Tycho Brahe, right? Don Perrier and his wife, Lynn Gagne, purchased Tycho Brahe from Bob Bogdanovich in, I believe, either early 79 or late 78. Mm-hmm. And Gamble split off to build the consoles, and Dirk split off to start his own business of renting electronics. And so there were three separate entities: Gamble Consoles, Innovative Audio, and Schubert Systems. Mm-hmm. Right? Schubert Systems was Dirk and his dad, right?
Right.
And his dad was a brilliant man, a computer programmer at TOW for weapons defense systems. And brilliant man. And but certainly not running a sound company, right? And so Dirk had started at Tycho Brahe when he was 14, right? Because he used to have to walk home from school right past Tycho Brahe, and he kept looking in the door and seeing what's going on here in Hermosa Beach, right? So he talked him into hiring him because he knew, I guess by 14, he probably knew more electronics than half the people in there, except everybody except maybe Gamble, mm-hmm. you know? And so I only knew of them by reputation because the reason that the Doobie Brothers wanted to switch over to Innovative was to use Jim Gamble's consoles, right? And the PA that Dirk Schubert and Jim Gamble had designed, because Dirk did the crossovers, right? And so I get a call out of the blue. "Hello, this is Jim Gamble." Well, you know, in the pantheon of engineering people in our business, that's like, you know, Moses getting a call from God.
Right. That's, you know, like, "Hello, hi, I'm Les Paul." Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So Gamble's on the phone. He says, "I've got these friends who they bought a sound company. They're really in over their heads, and they need somebody like you." Well, I don't know how Jim found out about me, but you know, when I was at A1 and off the road, I was ramrodding all sorts of projects. We completely redesigned the flying system, completely redesigned the monitors, built all new console cases. I was the one who designed that console case that were on shock absorbers for a PM2000 because it was so heavy that I put it on the shock absorbers, so because people were dropping it downstairs and stuff.
Right.
And so in order to prevent, you know, shock damage, I designed this case where the console actually floated on these off-road shock absorbers, and all you did was you took the top off and you tilted it over, and it was ready to mix on, right? So it could stay patched all the time. You didn't need a big old doghouse in the back, right? Everything was cool. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, apparently somehow Gamble had heard about this guy at A1 who's a really good ramrod. And I guess that was the best way to describe my position, because I worked with the head engineer at A1 was a guy named Bobby Ross, and he and I worked together very closely on redesigning a whole bunch of gear for A1. And, you know, Bobby and I would think of what to do, and then we go down to the wood shop, and there was this immensely talented carpenter named Lou Manick at the time, who was the A1 carpenter, and he could build anything. He was like, he'd look at it from the drawing, he'd turn the drawing over, and he'd go, I can do it. And there you go. There you go.
Uh-huh.
So it was the three of us, and we managed to redesign a lot of stuff within the short time that I worked at A1.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went down to Innovative, and I saw exactly what Gamble was talking about. And I said, I don't think being here for 2 weeks is going to make a whole lot of difference. And he said, try it out, see what happens. And I said, well, I don't know. I'm a little more kind of, Tiger Bray was kind of a very laid back South Bay sound company, that worked according to beach rules. Guys came in at noon, and so it was the 70s,
right?
Say or early 80s. So say no more.
Yep.
It was a time of excess, and but if we wanted the business to run right, we had to cut back on the excess.
Sure.
And so I after 2 weeks, I called Gamble and I said, I've done what I could. I've tried to explain, what direction we have to take to the owners and things. He said, well, will you accept the position of general manager? And I went, what? How in any way am I qualified to be general manager of a touring sound company? Once again, like I have throughout my career, I said yes. Right, because when you're challenged, you say yes.
Absolutely, you
say
yes, and then you figure it out, right?
Exactly. You learn. You study hard that next night, and you come in the next day, and you try to do it. So I had to learn about liability insurance. I had to learn about the mafia controls the garbage industry. I had all this stuff, that is totally foreign to my experience. I'm a guitar player, I'm a space case guitar player. That's what I do. And I play, I sing, I mix.
Oh, but isn't that how it is? We all of a sudden turn around one day and we realize we're professionals,
Yeah. Well, all of a sudden I realized that I was running a sound company, and we needed more clients, and we had Willie Nelson. We managed to we had the Doobie Brothers, but those two clients weren't enough to keep a sound company current or even the doors open. And so over my first couple of years there, we brought in Waylon Jennings. We brought in Bonnie Raitt. We did a lot for Jackson Browne when he was doing all of his No Nuke stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we did a lot of Kenny Loggins stuff before Terry Nelson took over. Mm-hmm. Right. I mixed a lot for Kenny when I would do. See, all I could do was one-offs. I had to stay home, and I was allowed to go out with Mike McDonald, right, because I had that previous thing with the Doobie Brothers. But according to the partnership agreement, I had to stay home and run the business. So
how was that for you after being on the road for so long? Wasn't that?
That was terrible. I mean, just as I found out that I didn't belong in recording studios, it took me 5 years to find out that the last place I needed to be was behind a office desk. I needed to be behind a mixing desk.
Right.
And so we had some setbacks at the end of 1985. And by the end of 86, Dirk and his dad decided to buy me out. Mm-hmm. We just, we're about a 5-system sound company, right? We could have about 5 things on the road at the same time. Mm-hmm. Well, we had 3 canceled in the fall of 85, and it took, and no, it was 2 canceled, and we didn't get the Kenny Loggins tour. Claire took it back. Mm-hmm. And so it was it was bleak. We had a bleak late fall and early winter, and at that point, Dirk and his dad bought me out. And I don't blame them. They wanted to make money. They wanted to stay in business, and they saw splitting it 3 ways wasn't the ideal position for them. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was once again, one door closes, another door opens. By a few months later, I got the call to go out and mix Whitney Houston on her first solo tour. I stayed with her in 86, 87, and 88. Whitney Houston led to getting a call from Paul Simon's manager, who was at a Whitney Houston show, and said, "Will you please come mix Graceland?" At that point, I said, "Boy, am I happy I'm not at that sound company anymore." Mm-hmm. And so in less than a year, I went from being a executive at a major sound company to being Paul Simon's front of house guy.
Not a bad transition.
I looked at it as a promotion.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
For big time. And Paul Simon led to Bette Midler. Mm-hmm. Paul Simon also led to Steely Dan. And so almost every door that's been open for me since was a result of going to work for Paul Simon. Although I certainly enjoyed mixing Whitney in those early years. You know, that was the pre Bodyguard movie, which was she, you know, when she took herself off the road for a few years, then she got in trouble with Bobby Brown and drugs.
Yeah, but before that, I mean, those were like that was the Narada Michael Walden era.
It was absolutely beautiful. I've never heard a singer like that, and I'll never ever hear another one like it. She was the most remarkable vocalist I've ever heard, and effortless, absolutely effortless. And you know, obviously she's begotten a huge trail of imitators, sure. Who have no idea, even though they're wonderful singers, but they have no idea how to do what she could do as effortlessly as she did it.
Yeah, it's the nuance. It really is.
I was in such awe of her. And she, when we did the live shows, we do like the really sexy songs, like Saving All My Love. We do them even slower than they were on the record. And you could just see guys in their seats basically melting while she was singing these songs.
Squirming in their chair, yeah.
Her first number one single was a song called Good Love. And we did Good Love so slowly. But at the end of Good Love, we did an 800 millisecond delay, 800 and change, I don't remember the change. And she would sing the phrase Good Love, and I would sing it back to her on the delay, you know, whatever she sang. And it was, you know, it was call and response. And that got men so riled up, you wouldn't believe. You just wouldn't believe it. Because there she was, 23-year-old goddess on the stage, 5'10", as beautiful as she could be, singing like no other woman has ever sung before, or will probably again. Mm-hmm. And it was hypnotizing. It was captivating. It was sexy without being at all lewd, you know. I mean, it was just as I had so much fun doing those shows. I can't tell you.
Well, it's an interesting segue. Now you're just talking about a little technical trick there, and you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you is you were very early on in your embrace of new technologies, and you always have been. You know, you were an early adopter of digital. Sure. You know, and yet, you know, you still managed to embrace new technology, but maintain a very organic approach, which goes back to what we were talking about your connection to the music, obviously. But you know, I think that there was a period of time there, especially 80s and 90s, where embracing digital was not an easy ship to get on.
We started using Yamaha digital stuff on Graceland as the DMP7. Remember that? The little 8-banger keyboard mixer?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we took that out on the road on Graceland in 1987. That was the keyboard mixer for Tony Cedrus.
Well, now
And
the big complaint with digital back then, of course, was not just the sound, but the dependability factor. And how, wasn't that a concern for you working live?
well, I didn't incorporate one into my setup until I brought O2Rs out on Paul Simon gigs, and that probably would have been mid to late '90s.
Okay.
And it was a good tool for turning off percussion mics, right? Because we invariably had a whole bunch of percussion. And so if somebody was just playing congas on one song, I'd want to turn everything else off, right? Or so having a programmable mixer for something that wasn't carrying a lot of complex timbre, right? Things like drums, bells, it's not like you need I can manipulate that console to get a good conga sound out of say an O2R, right? Whereas I might not be able to get a good vocal sound or a good sound out of James Taylor's acoustic guitar back in the O2R era of consoles.
Yeah.
But I could make it work for percussion. And so it became my sidecar, right? And then we added another percussionist, and so I had two of them. And I had a little MIDI keypad, and for every song, only the mics that needed to be on were on. And that's when I first started using snapshots on the O2R.
Which you really had to, because the menus were so convoluted and so.
Oh, you couldn't find them at all. Yeah,
you couldn't find.
No,
any.
You could.
And that was everybody's big objection to using them live, was that they just couldn't get anywhere fast.
Exactly. So you had to do it as a snapshot system, and you just had to be prepared to reach over and override it if it wasn't working. And so but for me, it was a great introduction, and the O2R was actually a very reliable console. It didn't have the most pristine audio that was coming out of it, but as I said, for things with limited bandwidth, like a drum, I could get enough cohesive bottom out of it to do djembes. I could get enough top end clarity out of it to have the bongos sound pleasing and not piercing, and the bells didn't go right through your brain, and it was the place that they were deficient was in the onboard plugins, because it was an SPX 90, and it wasn't even a 90 Roman numeral 2. Originally, it was SPX 90 programs.
It wasn't even as good as a Rev 7. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could use like a gated plate on the bongos, but to try to use a nice fat plate on the congas, it just wasn't there. So I'd have to go outboard on that. But it was when we were working in studios in the 70s, that's when we first saw the first digital reverbs. We got the Droid, the EMT, the 250s, and the first Black 224. The first Black 224. Now, the Droid was wonderful, with the levers.
I remember those. They were so cute.
Yeah. R2D2, we called it. Yeah. And it was a staple on all records in the late 70s.
It was a staple in every studio in the late 70s, early 80s.
Exactly. Sure. And but I was really intrigued with the lexicon, because you had parameters on this little box that you could play with, right?
Yeah.
And so I was always a big dickerer, and my mixing method has always been you turn them until it sounds good, and I'm not just playing around. I always have a goal in mind, which is something I try to explain to students or people just starting in the industry. Is you don't do anything unless you actually have a goal in mind. Try to envision the perfect place you're trying to get to, and then determine the best path to get there.
That was part 1 of our interview with live sound engineer David Morgan. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us for part 2.